before I write a single word of a novel like Spinsterella, I do my research. And the reason why I do my research is because I want the reader to not only come out of the story with a great, entertaining reading experience, but I want them to come out of the reading experience with an understanding of the subject matter. And what I'm finding from people when I present them with Spinsterella is that they're giving me responses about the goth subculture that show that they literally don't know much about it. And one of the reasons why I wrote Spinsterella was to introduce many African Americans to the goth subculture and give them a little bit of an understanding about it. Now, I have been aware of the goth subculture since the mid 1980s. I've oftentimes watched a lot of films from that people would consider, staples in the goth subculture, like Tim Burton's Beetlejuice, um, and and Batman and other films. And I have been well aware of the goth subculture for many years. And as a writer, I have always wanted, to write a goth character, and I planned a goth character way back in the 1990s. As a guy who writes fantasy and science fiction, I thought I was, pretty well qualified in writing about the goth subculture. I mean, I'm a guy who writes, stories about, demons and vampire stories. So I feel that and fantasy stories. So I felt I had, the qualifications to, explore the goth subculture the same way I explored African American sororities in the Thetas. But while I got a lot of positive responses to the Thetas, the things that people have been telling me about the goth subculture while I promote Spinsterella have been, disturbing. And they've been disturbing because a lot of the information that I'm hearing is just not true. Like, I hear from many African Americans who will sit there and tell me that, the goth subculture is about worshiping the devil. And this, again, is not true at all. The goth subculture was a culture that started out in the late 1970s, early 1980s as part of the punk subculture. It is a music-based culture, and it has nothing to do with religion at all. While a lot of the people who participate in the goth subculture wear various religious symbols, they have a different meaning. Oftentimes, when you see a symbol like an ankh, like the one I use for ISIS, while that symbol in Egyptian, means life, the Goths use it in an ironic way, to talk about, the dark aesthetic. And others will use other religious symbols in the same way. It's kind of used in an ironic fashion. And this is something that, goes over people's heads. They think because they see these religious symbols that your Goth worships Satan. And this is not the case at all. Goth has absolutely nothing to do with any religion whatsoever. I have watched over 200 or 300 hours of videos. I have listened to numerous people all over the world talk about goth, and I've listened to them talk about the subculture, and all of them, all have said goth has nothing to do with religion whatsoever. There are Christian goths, there are Hindu goths, there are Muslim goths, and most goths, for the most part, many are agnostic, and that's why I can say, goth has nothing to do with religion, has nothing to do with devil worship, has nothing to do with Satan. And another thing that I run into from people is them telling me stuff that's just totally, totally inaccurate. I had a family member tell me that Kiss was a goth band. And I sat there, I said to myself, Kiss is not a goth band. Susie and the Banshees is a goth band. Joy Division is a goth band. VNV Nation is a goth band. Um, those are goth bands. And then there are people who will say, Marilyn Manson is a goth band. While many goths listen to Marilyn Manson is a pop band. And this is something that, a lot of people, could learn if they just did some research. And what I find, with a lot of people regarding goths is that they look at the outside and they get spooked and they don't, take a moment to listen to what people are saying, regarding the goth subculture. They go by, they judge by what they see instead of taking a moment to, listen to the person, listen to the facts regarding them, and, or just going out and doing a little bit of research on the subject. I spent a year and a half of doing research to write this Spinsterella novel, in addition to the background knowledge I acquired over the last 25 years. So, and in that time, I learned even more about the goth subculture so that I could, present a story that was based on facts about it, because I not only wanted to, just write a story about a African American goth character, I wanted to educate people more about the goth subculture so they could come to a better understanding of it. I feel that when a reader, picks up a book like a Spinsterella or Thetas, they should come out of the reading experience learning something more about a culture, a way of life, and come to a better understanding of the people who participate in that way of life. And I wanted people who read Spinsterella to come to a better understanding of the goth subculture and to come to a better understanding of the people who participate in that lifestyle. Um, Most goths are not deviant. Most goths are not violent. Most goths, as from what I've seen, are very friendly people, and they are the least likely to get into trouble. From what I've seen, your average goth, the most they're going to do is, fall asleep at somebody's house watching a Monsters marathon, or they'll come back from a concert, and sleep it off. It's not a violent subculture. Most of the people, from what I've seen in their videos and read in their blogs, are, some of the friendliest and nicest people in the world. I mean, most goths go to Disneyland every year without a single incident. And, I look at the goth subculture and I just want to, try to help refute many of the ideas and generalizations people have regarding it, because there is nothing, to fear about a goth. Yes, many wear makeup to look scary and spooky, but that's the surface. On the inside, you're going to run into some of the friendliest and nicest people out there. And, the reasons why these people dress and go in and become a part of this subculture vary from person to person, and every person, has their own story of why they became a goth and why they decided to become a part of this subculture and why they feel comfortable being a part of that subculture and living, a goth lifestyle. That's all in the individual, and each person's going to have their own story. And I felt like, telling an individual story in the Spinsterella novel regarding an African American goth. That was one of the things I wanted to do, because I've always wanted to write, again, a goth character 25 years ago. I mean, I remember when I wrote my first novel, The Changing Soul, which I never published, and I used to describe the character, I called her a grown up, chocolate colored Wednesday Addams. And I had been wanting to, write that character for many years, and I never got a chance to because I just couldn't find the story where she would fit. And in this story, Spinsterella, she fit very well because she fit right into the comedy aesthetic I was planning, because it was a story with a lot of dark comedy and a lot of satire and a lot of irony in it. And the Matilda character fit very well into it. And, she was able to present all the points I wanted to present regarding the goth subculture, regarding, people's fears and people's perceptions of people who are outside of a certain lifestyle or a certain environment. Because the whole book really, while it's a comedy, is a commentary, on fear and prejudice and people not understanding people from different cultures and people from different lifestyles. Which is one of the big problems I saw in the black community, because in the African American community, everybody feels everybody has to live one way in order to be defined as black. And I felt, if I explored, a character who lived on the dark side of being black, they would come into it and, show people a different side of being black, and also, help people to come to understand about the intra-racial prejudices that black people have, regarding people of different cultures and different ways of life. And that's something that I felt like I wanted to explore, with this novel. Yes, I do tell a lot of jokes in this one. This is a very, very hilarious novel, but I wanted that to be, a major point in the story. And I wanted people to understand, that we shouldn't really judge people, from the outside. We should really get to know the content of their character. And that's what I feel people should do regarding people in the goth subculture. Because as I've gotten to know many of the people from what I've seen in their videos and what they present to the world, I see some of the nicest people I have ever, had the chance to encounter. I see people who are, very friendly, very kind, and, are a big ball of sunshine. And I wouldn't mind being friends with any of those people if I ever ran into any of them, because they really seem like the kind of people who would be great friends to someone. And I feel that, people should, not look at the external and look at the internal character traits of people in the goth subculture, and, really get to know the people from that perspective, because most of your goths, again, from what I've seen, are some of the nicest and friendliest people out there. And, they're the kind of people, I feel that, we need more of in the world. I mean, I look at the goth subculture. I don't see anything evil about it. I don't see anything dangerous about it. I don't even see anything to worry about it. I mean, I'm more worried of a kid who's adopting a thug lifestyle than a goth lifestyle. If I had a kid and one of them was a goth, I wouldn't worry about them. The one I would worry about is the kid in the thug or gangster lifestyle, because that's the one who is involved with drugs and guns. Whereas your goth, all they're going to do really is, again, they'll dress in dark clothes, but all they're going to do is usually just listen to some music or read some books about, vampires or something like that. But they're not going to do anything that is, really dangerous. I don't see them doing anything really dangerous. I mean, a group of goths can get together and go somewhere and come right back, and it's not a problem. And while your kid who's into hip hop, there's a chance that they may wind up um, going somewhere and not coming back at all. That's the sad, horrible truth. But most people will feel more safe with their child being involved with hip hop than they will with being in a goth subculture. And the irony is that the child in the goth subculture, 99% of the time, is going to come home and they're going to be all right. They're going to, because the event that they go to, the concerts that they go to, are going to come and go without a single incident. Meanwhile, the child who goes to the hip hop concert, sadly, there's a chance that they may not come back alive. And that's, something that a lot of people don't think about. But one of the reasons why I wrote the Spinsterella novel was so that people could learn a bit more about the goth subculture, and they could learn, a bit about a person from it and their story and their experience. And I wanted people, to come out of the story learning a bit more about, how prejudice makes us scared of things and our perception of things, and how it, prevents us from being able to do the things that we do. And I also wanted to, talk about other issues that, goths deal with, like shyness and social anxiety, because I deal with that every day. And I wanted to write about, that point from that point of frame of reference. Um, and I wanted people, to really get to know people from the goth subculture. I really wanted people to know about a bit more about the goth subculture, because I really had fun learning about the goth subculture the same way I had fun, learning about child stars when I was doing the screenplay all about Maryland. And this was another book that I ran into, African American prejudice. People from my own family got upset because they saw a nude on the cover, and they judged the book by the cover instead of the content. Meanwhile, when I present this book to people all over the world, and they read it, they go past the cover, they call it one of the best stories, about teen child stars and, African American actresses that is out there. And with Spinsterella, from people who have read the book, they have given me a lot of positive feedback on it. Um, and I'm hoping that people, come out of it learning a bit more about the goth subculture and coming to a bit of an understanding about the goth subculture, because some of the stuff that I've read from people who don't know anything about the goth subculture is really, disturbing and downright sad. I mean, I remember reading one Christian website where they sat there and, went into all this crazy stuff talking about how goths worship the devil and they drink blood and they kill animals. And this thing was so hilarious. I had a good long laugh, reading it. And I sat there, I said to myself, none of this stuff is true. And we really need more people out here to, you know, refute many of these ideas, because the whole thing that keeps people from learning about the Goth subculture or wanting to be a part of it are, people who present ignorant ideas like that, saying things that clearly are not true, clearly have no basis in fact, have not been proved, cannot be proven whatsoever, and make these broad generalizations that are just not true at all. Um, they're just not true at all, and they should not. No, everybody should just do their own research on a subject because that's the only way you're really going to learn about it. And again, I had a lot of fun learning about the goth subculture as I was writing Spinsterella, and I feel that I came out of it, a whole lot better for the whole experience because when I look at goth people, I've always looked at goth people and I've always just seen people, but now I look at people from the goth subculture and I just feel completely comfortable about them. And that was a great thing to come out of the entire experience of writing this novel. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.